photographs and the others interactively looking around, panoramics. So this is a really, really old project I was lucky to be involved in, and the idea was to take a small town. Aspen wasn't bad. Touch screens were in at the time, as were turtlenecks. And if you watch very carefully, what's going on here is we shot up and down every street in Aspen, Colorado with a camera triggered by distance rather than time. And we shot going through every intersection every possible way. So that was a match cut, and there are actually two, at the time, laserdisc players leapfrogging back and forth between straight sequences and turn sequences. We shot everything between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. and from the center of the street, one frame every 10 feet. And we filmed a 10 by 10 mile grid centered on the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. And, these gyro-stabilized, camera pod and whatnot. And again, it's one frame every, something like 30 feet. And the idea was not to give a simulated helicopter ride, but to give you an experience that you can't have in the real world like this. It's total hyper real. It's just simple trackball speed. And, it almost looks like computer graphics when you shoot like this, which is kind of interesting. This is all cinema. This actually was all shot in film using stop encoder down there that triggers the camera for a bunch of reasons dealing with the history and analogy. It's exactly 100 years later. We packaged it in a kinetoscope, and these are flicker optics that allow 3D. And the crank is basically hooked up to a mouse. And by this time I was getting more and more politicized about who controls representation of place and its inhabitants. And by the time I did this project, I was taken by the counterpoint between the beauty of the tour of the landscape and the politics of tourism, and made it to be let's pause for a split second. Made it to be sort of a joke on, as if this thing was trying to peddle tourism 100 years ago in this totally politically incorrect world, in an incorrect way. So I was at Interval Research at the time, and some of my computer vision colleagues said, "Wow, you're shooting that stuff? We can use this footage." And this is now a long time ago. But, the magic, the holy grail is how can you wave a camera around a space like this room and end up with a 3D computer model? And it's really hard. So they took a single stereo pair here and derived depth and then splat the pixels into a computer 3 space. And this is kind of cool because it shows exactly what a camera does, in a way. But to try to really build it up in a big model is hard, challenging stuff. Okay, so now we're going to wind the clock back to a parallel strain of work I was doing with representing looking around rather than moving around in space. So, yes, Super 8 millimeter film, projector in the center, on a 1 RPM turntable that's just slowly rotating, but the footage, which is here projected just on a simple acrylic screen as a study, was also shot on the same 1 RPM turntable. So I hope you can see that there's this, it's kind of like a flashlight effect going on, like a spotlight effect, that it's moving at the same speed. So it has a spatial correspondence or natural kind of look. And I played around trying to build these contraption projectors and decided that I really just wanted to make a statement artistically about this, and favorite landscape. And then go in and by hand select images that have just a little bit of overlap, and knowing sort of, the math of the optics and whatnot, build a 3D computer model and texture map the images in and just kind of adjust them all by hand. It's not perfect, it's not bad. Group 3D panoramic project, and had been working with, I think the sound's going to be too loud here, maybe not, with the UNESCO World Heritage Center to get into 4 dicey areas on their endangered list with this 200 kilograms of equipment. So it's 2 35 millimeter cameras for 3D, 1 for each eye, rotating, and I collected 4-channel sound, and the goal was to select public plazas in each of these local sites working exclusively with local collaborators. Dubrovnik, that's the Orlando column covered in wood because they were bombing at the time. It wasn't symbolic, it was like functional. And plop the camera down and shoot through the course of the day, several times a day, and shoot